Welcome. Welcome to our session today. Our session is transforming MRO sourcing for complex organizations and how a strong data foundation is critical for that success. We have a full agenda today with a brief discussion on key business challenges, and we're seeing in the industry, but what you should be expecting in those challenges when you're potentially looking for solutions. We are excited to bring to you a visual understanding of this topic, so beyond what you've probably normally seen in the industry today, these application demonstrations, and then we'll open up the audience for questions. But do not hesitate at any time to ask questions. You can document in the chat. We will try to accommodate them throughout the presentation, but we will definitely get them to the end of the audience and questions in the Q&A. Data intelligence is more than having the right data at the right time. It is about having data at a critical point in time that has the most impact on your organization. Now, this simply couldn't have occurred 5 years ago with the tools and technologies that we had available. We know now that we've been collecting hundreds of zettabytes of data, but we had no feasible way to understand it, and we couldn't understand it with any high level of confidence. In fact, it's only been in the last 5 years that AI technologies have become more accessible, allowing companies to really understand just how powerful data could become. And when we integrate those technologies into these applications and services, this is what's really allowing those companies to become more competitive while remain relevant to the constant changes that we have today with both our internal and external customers. As more and more companies are leveraging AI technologies, this has also created a huge influx of new companies into the marketplace. For example, where we once saw a handful of enterprise applications, we now see hundreds of applications, but positioned in a very niche market because they're solving very specific business challenges. As a result of all of this, those enterprise applications just can't keep up with and continue to position themselves to provide the necessary capabilities to solve every single business challenge that continues to pop up because of our evolving ecosystem. But this brings us to this hybrid or centralized solution where enterprise applications connects to these products and services and work in harmony together to really provide you guys with this true end-to-end lifecycle solution. So if the goal is to remain competitive within your industry, to stay relevant with the changes in the consumer demand and to stay ahead of those constantly changing global supply chains, then data is the underlying foundation that is going to set you up for success. But if you don't have a way to access that data, and if you don't understand what the data is telling you at a high level of confidence, then you're already falling behind. Let me introduce you to our guest today. Julia, she's head of sales and customer support at Creactives. Now, if we look at this life cycle, starting at the beginning of understanding that data, that's where Julia starts. Her solution, Creactives, is leveraging AI to support the procurement supply chain data, looking at both quality and confidence within the material master governance, spend analytics, and automating the process for categorization, enrichment, and cleansing. Now, this may sound like, oh yeah, we've seen that before, but I assure you, you have not seen that. So thank you for joining us today. Lucas, he's the co-founder and managing director at Archlet. So where Julia is looking at collecting that data and harnessing it and putting it into a place that is going to provide value, then that shifts over to Lucas and Archlet, where they also are leveraging AI technologies to strengthen those insights that maximizes those negotiating powers, enables resources to truly, really work on those value-added strategic initiatives. And this leads to erasing, yes, I said the word erasing, inefficiencies, and supports a better informed decision-making within that supplier lifecycle. Welcome to you both.
Hi, happy to be here, Melissa.
Happy to be here as well. Hello.
So I want to start with a particular question. As I work with and talk to a lot of people in procurement and supply chain, I sometimes get the question, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that someone else was having the same problem I was having. I thought it was just us. And it wasn't until we got knowledge sharing and we started connecting together that we realized that some of these common themes and challenges were not unique to an individual, but they were actually being experienced across the broader. I want to start there. And Julia, will start with you. What are some of these challenges that you're seeing over and over again that maybe we all felt like they were just happening to us?
The main challenge we face every time we analyze the data of a new company and we talk about a bigger multinational company is the multilinguality. So every company that has grown and developed several kind of site production in different countries, when you look at the data, we'll have data in different languages. So the same article will be described in different languages, but it's the same article. To have this kind of visibility overall the data, independently of the language, is quite difficult with traditional systems. It would require to centralize the data, to have a unique item with multiple languages translated inside of the system. And this is something that is too costly. The idea is that thanks to the AI, you can have a layer on top of the existing system that will leverage the data in the original language without the need of translation. And this complexity is made even more complex by the fact that companies are growing with mergers and acquisition, so they are probably also having an architectural silos situation with several ERPs that are again leveraging the same kind of data but separated physically. So the same AI I described before that can leverage the language topic can also be integrated with several systems, make them transparent as they were only one single source of truth.
And Lucas.
Yeah, thank you. So I can only relate what Julia says. And as you mentioned in the beginning, Julia and Creactives are in the very, very beginning of the value chain, right? They make sure that everyone understands what kind of data they have. Is it in MRO, but also in services? And then when we come in as a sourcing engine, so to say, so to execute a certain strategy, for us, one of the biggest challenges we come across is overwhelmed by complexity. Because let's assume you have solved that big issue of having like a good overview of your data, different ERPs, multilinguality, and you understand what you need. The complexity of what you need is quite high, right? We're talking of thousands of different SKUs in different specifications, different quantities, different sites. So what we see often is that very, very oftentimes category managers shy away from these complexities, and instead of running events, running RFPs more regularly or more frequently, or update prices of their catalogs more frequently, they rather don't do that, right? Because it's a lot of pain to go through the process. And obviously there are different challenges in terms of tools. One reason is they have a legacy system which can't handle the complexity. And it's always easier to just stay with your supplier and don't go out to market. And the second option is they use email and Excel, which means that they just spend tons of time crunching data manually, and they could use that time for other tasks, right? So we see a lot of that complexity, and overcoming that complexity is a big challenge. And in MRO specifically, because that's the topic of today, there are even more complexities because, for example, the demands or the volumes are quite volatile. Even though you know what you needed last year, you're not 100% sure what you need the year to come. And if you are then in an RFP environment, if you can't commit to volumes, that increases complexity again during a negotiation. Another thing you mentioned, Julia, is also specifications. Like, obviously, you're looking for a specific SKU, but how can you decide if this SKU, which might not be 100% the same, still fits the purpose and can actually be used for maybe an exchange of that specific SKU? So complexity and overcoming it is one of the biggest challenges we see from a sourcing perspective.
If we move from the challenges, because we recognize that these challenges are going to exist, but really focus on what I'd mentioned earlier, that the big enterprise solutions, they're not going away. They have value, but they're not going to be nimble enough. And I'm going to stress that they're not going to be nimble enough to be able to really focus on the key business solutions that keep coming up over and over again because we're changing so much more quickly and technology is catching up so much more fast. So when we look at how we're solving these problems, that's really where we see, as Lucas mentioned, the early part of the value chain. And that's where Creactives and Archlet play very nicely together. They harmonize together in that early stages. So in looking at that hybrid solution, as we connect with a Creactive to get that data, as we connect with Archlet to leverage that data and make those better informed decisions, let's talk a little bit about, Julia, what is that centralized or hybrid solution? What's the definition of that? And then let's move into where that value is coming from as Creactives and Archlets are feeding into that larger picture.
I will share one slide to explain this topic of centralized solution that I think that is helpful. So you should see the slide now. Do you see it?
Yes, fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the idea is that I said before, we have this challenge of the different architectural styles. You have several ERPs, all of them contain material master data, spend data, supplier information, and they are not normalized, they are not harmonized. So this centralized solution that we envisage is something that is non-invasive, that makes possible to receive all this raw data and process it through an artificial intelligence that makes possible to clean the data, making clean the historical data, but at the same time keep them clean in the long term. So the idea is that if you want to implement this kind of solution, you don't need to really make merges between your systems, because the system will take care about the preparation of the data for all the business initiative you need to put in place. They can be optimization of stock or cost optimization, like using this data to upload it in Archlet. And this kind of platform we are proposing is something that is also involving in the initial AI training domain expert of the customer itself. So will be a sort of intelligence that will not only leverage the experience of the past project of Creactives, but also the experience of the people that are living in the company right now, and will make the knowledge of these people eternal for the future to interpret correctly also future data. And this is something that can have an impact on the backend system, amending the data in the material master if we want, and we will show you later on this topic, but can also be something that is just used for analytics and then to produce actionable results in solution like Archlet. Mm-hmm. So please, Lucas.
And maybe to build up on that again, it's when we look into the procurement landscape, and you mentioned it before, Melissa, you said the players will stay, right? Because they add value. And I totally agree. And in the end, procurement tools should actually reflect procurement processes, right? That's nothing more, nothing less. But if you're then very honest with yourself, is, as you said too, there are so many different sub processes. No one can be best in all of these sub processes. So when we talk about a hybrid system, it's sometimes we refer to kind of the best of both worlds. You have a solid player who plays your backbone, making sure that everything regarding the ERP, P2P runs smoothly. And you enrich that backbone with niche solutions, such as, for example, Creactives and Archlet, to enhance a certain project process and make it better and leverage latest technology. So I think we would wish that there's a tool for everything, but as it is in our job descriptions too, right? It's very hard to be good at a lot of things at the same time. So that's how we see the hybrid landscape. And I think what we now demo to you is just one approach, how you could link together two best of breed systems, but actually use a backbone system as your core.
Yeah, and Lucas, I think that was very well articulated, because one of the things that Julia mentioned that on her slide was unstructured data. And a lot of times, early on, as a data expert, one of the challenges that I have is everybody wants to get that unstructured data into a structured format before they want someone like a Creactives and an Archlet to really access it. And if you look at that time frame, sometimes that can take years, at minimum a good 12 to 14 months just to get something structured into unstructured. And then Lucas, your comment, you've lost a lot of value. You've lost all that opportunity. So I know one of the values that we really wanted to focus on today, something different that we haven't seen, is we're going to share a visual understanding of exactly what it is we're talking about through the application demos. And again, we're going to start early with Creactives and Julia and how that data is being utilized and from unstructured, harnessing it in a way that can then be picked up by Lucas and Archlet. So Julia, let's start with you.
Thank you, Melissa. So I will share again my screen. And in this case, I want to bring you in a real journey on how the data can be received and from the customer, from several systems, and be transformed in order then to feed the processes like the ones that are running in Archlet. So a typical situation, do you see the screen, right? Yes. A typical situation is a situation where we have multiple systems, I said. So let's imagine multiple ERPs, different countries, so different languages, different plans. Many times the different plans are acting as separated silos, each one sourcing in a separated way the different articles they buy, but many times the production are similar, so the spare parts are the same, just called with different names. And each and every ERP can have different hierarchies. So I can have a structure of the data, categorization structure that differ. And on top of that, they are also generic. So we can have categories like other spare parts, mechanical, sometimes no category at all. And this kind of information that is the only information that has a granularity that is actionable by a traditional process is not enough to support sourcing activities. In particular, said by Lucas as well, in many MRO area where the complexity is huge, is the area that is more complex in all the spend categories, because we are talking about hundreds of thousands of articles, hundreds of thousands of different kind of solution that you can implement. And if we process this with the AI, the first thing that we produce in what we call the digital twin transformation of this original unstructured data is the categorization. So we have on the left the historical data in red, and on the right, the categorization we can bring to the table with AI in green. So the original categories can be heterogeneous and generic, and many times with a huge level of error, 30% of error in the best-in-class companies. And on the right side, we can find the most granular categorization given by the AI, in this case in UNSPSC, that is an international standard. If I make an example, just to make it more clear, we can take, for example, other spare part. This is a category that was in the original system. Other spare part can be a ball bearing, can be an O-ring, can be whatever thing of 70 categories that the AI has recognized. And if we take, for example, ball bearing, we can discover that ball bearing is not just in other spare part, but if I remove the first filter, we can discover that it was originally in 202 categories in the original data. So it was impossible without a categorization, a massive categorization made by the AI in this case, to discover the real addressable spend of a sourcing activity on ball bearings. And we discovered this because we have analyzed the text of the description of those ball bearings. Those ball bearings may be in Spanish, like in this case, can be in other languages, like in German, but we don't care about the language because the AI is capable to understand more than 25 languages. And independently from the original category, brings the right new category that can be used for the following processes. But the category is just a grouping. If I want to really compare prices and understand what I really need to source, I need to make a step ahead in this digital twin creation regarding the spend data and the material master data. And the step ahead is the recognition of brands and codes or technical attributes. Brands can be very, very different in the different categories of MRO, can be 1,000. In the case of the bearings, can be like SKF, INAFAG, NSK. These are examples of potential manufacturers that you can find in the original data. And obviously, through Archlet, you can discover much more example of new manufacturers or suppliers or distributors that can then source this kind of articles. But if we discover what has been done in the past, then we can better understand what we can do and we want to do in the future. And we can also recognize through the AI identifiers of these bearings. In the case of bearing, there is an ISO designation that makes possible to identify in a very precise way an article. If I take one of them, like this one, we can see, for example, that this particular kind of bearing has been purchased from SKF, INAFAG, NSK. So we can really understand item by item, which is the current behavior of the consumption model of a company. Or this other article is purchased from 7 different part numbers. Which are the part numbers? These ones. And maybe I buy the same article also free text. So without a part number, all these descriptions that are very different are the same article. It seems to be strange, but if you look at the description, you will discover that inside you find the same designation, but is very well hidden in the text. So the green part you see here, the category, the code that is this designation, and a normalized text that we can provide are something that enables then several processes. Do you want to fix this information in the backend system? This is possible because we can also leverage this kind of information in vertical solutions that are then integrated with the backend system in order, for example, to fix the problem of having so many bearings with different part numbers. So
Hey,
in
Julia?
this case, yeah.
Hey, Julia, I'm going to pause and just ask you a question because it's completely relevant right now to exactly what you're talking about. So the question is what if there is no article description at all, or it just says the word other? How can the system enrich data based on other parameters that come with that record, such as the tax ID of the supplier or the previous order of the same supplier?
Yeah, in this case, we can mix data sources that are coming from different transactions. So we can discover that that description that is empty in the invoice maybe has information in the purchase order. We can discover information that are coming from other sources. In the PLM, sometimes you discover that you have information that make us possible to discover which is the designation of this bearing, while in the ERP this information is not present. The interesting point is that once you have detected all the sources of information, you can put all together and leverage them in order to identify properly the article. And that is forever. So it is something that can be used continuously.
Thank you.
And just to give you an idea of how to fix this information in the backend system, we can, in this case, you have a vertical solution that can help you to navigate these duplicates and say, okay, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items that are exactly the same bearing. If I want, I can define a relation between them and say that they are duplicates and define which will be remain in the system, the one with the crown, and which will be substituted. And if I have a system that is a multiple ERP landscape, so the client, the SAP 100 and the 200, we can even create golden records that are synchronizing from now on forever the item that will remain as a golden record, single point of truth for this bearing. And last but not least, we can keep clean the house because we can guide the user in creating new bearings. In this case, if I write, for example, in French, roulement, MU 307 ECP, the system will do two things automatically that are relevant for this exercise: to categorize, to extract relevant information, and to find if the same article is existing in the material master data, avoiding the creation of a new material that already exists in the system. In this case, I wrote in French and the system answered in Spanish, by the way. So it's something that is cross-language and avoid the creation of new materials. But If you don't want to fix the problem in the backend system, you can, in any case, leverage this information in order to make a better sourcing activity, because the data that we have extracted and normalized, even if it's not amended in the backend, can be used to discover the addressable spend of those bearings. The normalized text that we can extract and normalized can be the input for a process in Archlet to create a sourcing event. And I can provide to Lucas a cleansed file that has all this augmented information, the digital twin part, in order to launch on Archlet this sourcing activity to make actionable the savings that so far are on paper.
Thank you, Julia. And I think
just quick question before we transition, because this question kind of leverages both the data and the strategic sourcing. But sometimes there's a challenge when we look at the historical data of the supplier, is understanding if that supplier has availability. So for example, last year's supply, when we talked about earlier about the constant global changes in supply chain, last year the supplier may not have been guaranteed for supplying for this year. Do you have any insights, Julia, as to how that can be solved with Creactives?
In this case, whatever information that is in the backend system, we can have it. So if there is a problem of the lead time of the supplier, if this information comes from the backend system, we can have this information shown regarding that specific supplier. So we can leverage the historical information. What we don't have is the future. That is the part of Lucas.
Then that's a perfect transition to Lucas.
Great. So as we've seen, and you see my screen? Yes, great. What Julia just explained is that, and please check out this graphic here. We have a lot of data flowing, and now our goal is to help you run a sourcing event and help you to make better decisions faster, even though you have high complexity. And as an input to our system could be the output of a Creactives normalized data set in the example of ball bearings. And actually, we show you here the exact download from Julia, just in an Excel format where we have some ERP data, including item description, quantities, but then also the Creactive classifications. And of course, if you then go out to market, you can ask suppliers for even more parameters such as lead times, payment terms, etc. Now, my goal is now to show you how our system helps you to create an event, benchmark, and actually translate your strategy into real life. And whenever you start an RFP in Archlet, we guide you through 6 super simple steps. And I tell you, as soon as you know your demands, you can start and set up an event in no time. You add a description, you invite your suppliers, and then this is one of the biggest challenges. Usually you need to upload your very large and extensive bid sheet. Now, what I do here is I show you that I take the Excel file from Creactives. Our system then automatically detects the file. We start matching the columns, and what we do within a few seconds is we create your demand online in the system and replicate whatever you have had and what you're now looking to source. And this list can be very extensive. It doesn't take longer than a few seconds to load it in our system. Obviously, you would then go ahead, you would define the cost formula, add your historic quotes, historic prices, and schedule the round, invite suppliers, and start your bidding event. Now, I want to go a bit faster now, because obviously how to run a bidding event, I will not show you. What I will focus on now is how we differentiate and how we actually reduce that complexity to help you better understand the data which you have just received from your suppliers. And for that, I have created an RFP with 2 suppliers as 2 rounds, 4 suppliers per round, and we have more than 1,000 bids collected. And the first thing our system will do is we will go through all the data points and try to help you understand the data. And everyone who ever run an MRO event knows that outliers are the biggest things you need to check in the very beginning. So what we do is here, we have insight cards, which actually help you to fully understand the data quality. And by clicking on, for example, this card, you will directly be guided to the outliers recognized by our system. In this case, 7. And if you look more closely, you then directly see, all right, so what's my baseline? What's my spend from last year? And which suppliers gave me an offer? And why is this an outlier? It's because supplier 3 somehow has probably misunderstood the specifications or is simply just not competitive. So outlier detection is completely automated. But what we also do is we guide you with this graphic here to your units or to your SKUs where you have the biggest cost, meaning the biggest impact to your final decision. And instead of you going through a massive data set, our system helps you to understand that actually on this specific SKU, ball bearing 27, you have a massive spend and you should definitely double check and fully understand it. Now, thanks to the Creactives normalized descriptions, you can also then filter your data and say, well, I only want to have ball bearings groupings 6002 and set. And if you do that, our graphs will be adapted and you only see the data you actually want to see. Now, of course, as we are a sourcing tool, negotiations is key. So we also help you to negotiate, understand the coverage, communicate that to your suppliers. And as soon as you get back the second quotes, you will directly see which supplier changed what from round 1 to round 2. And this is all numerical and commercial. But when you already have looked quite closely here, there's a second axis, in this case called lead times. Because at Archlet, for us, it's very important that we help you make decisions which are not only focused on price, but also factor in additional parameters. And when we do that, we usually say we go into the scenario section, because the scenario piece is where your strategy should come to life. And here again, we start with some basic setups. Like, for example, we show you your baseline scenario where you see that in the past you have worked with 2 suppliers and you spend currently for this group of ball bearings 836,000 euros. Then the system directly calculates the best price, which is the lowest possible. As you can see, you could decrease your spend by 71,000, but you would need to work with 4 additional suppliers, and actually you would need to change 352 SKUs, which is nearly impossible in real life. So now it gets interesting, because what you can do with our tool is you can create different scenarios looking into different factors and try to find the best possible outcome. For example, sustainability. But that's not all. I will now guide you through how you can create your own scenarios. And there are 2 options. Either you answer some questions manually, or you just use our Copilot, which actually helps you to create these scenarios in a very easy and simple way. Sorry, now I'm lost. For example, you can ask a question, how can I create an ideal scenario for MRO? What we will do is we have trained our system on different categories. So we will now recommend you what you can do to create a scenario based on the MRO category to make it ideal for your strategy. So, for example, identify key items or also limit certain suppliers. So you could then say, well, please make sure that we only have 2 suppliers as a maximum and we should not consider more. Whenever you tell the system something, we then add it as a rule, as you can see here on the left-hand side, which basically should illustrate more and more your strategy. On top, what's very common is that you, for example, don't want to work with non-incumbent suppliers. And if you work with them, they should only get a certain max percentage of spend to avoid that you have very many newcomers in your portfolio. And last but not least, you could also say, well, please, on top of that, keep the lead time as low as possible, because it's important that we actually have them as fast as possible. Lastly, you could actually even use our Copilot to now communicate that strategy with your boss and ask for an email with, for example, 100 words, which tells now exactly what we did. We have created an ideal scenario, which includes rules to limit the number of suppliers, ensure that non-incumbent suppliers get a maximum of 20%, Always prioritize suppliers with the lowest lead time. These rules will help us streamline our MRO procurement, improve supply performance, and achieve cost savings. I'll be happy to provide more details if needed. So I think you get the twist here. Whenever you are then ready, you can create your custom scenario. You will be able to compare it against the rest, and you will actually see that the system has done what you have asked it for. And I think the main goal here is really the reduction of complexity in large and complex RFPs, and Creactives as a source is amazing because obviously the data quality is correct and we can execute the strategy based on your needs. And with this, I would give it back to you, Melissa, and maybe we can round it up or also open the Q&A session.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have not asked a question yet, feel free to provide it within the Q&A. We will get those answers to you. One of the questions that was asked is they wanted to share this recording with someone in their organization. Do we have an idea, Julia, where or when this recording will be available?
This is for Lucas, I think.
Yes, we will definitely make it available by tomorrow.
And they should come to your website or go to your LinkedIn page. Where should they stop first to get access to it?
So we will share an email. So you will, if you have signed up, you will get it. And then I guess Creactives and also Archlet will actually upload it on the websites and make it accessible.
In LinkedIn as well.
Okay. One question that came through is going back to Creactives around the unstructured data. So for example, a lot of the tools today, they require that you collect a lot of data, that you are housing that data on your servers. And just wanted to clarify that because you're leveraging that AI technology on top of that data, can you confirm if you're really collecting all this data and storing it, or is there a different approach that you're taking?
It depends on the vertical solution that we have to implement. There are some situations that are dataless and some situations where it requires to have the data. So, for example, if the customer just wants that in real time we suggest categories embedded in a transaction to improve the data ex ante, this does not require that we retain the data. We learn from the historical data, then the neural network is ready and is working dataless, learning from the usage of the users. While if you talk about a material master data governance layer on top of the system, in that case, we need to have the data. So we replicate the data that are resident in the different systems, and we manage a subset of the material master data governance process on those data in a staging area with our flow of approval that then can impact on the backend system at the end of the approval process in order to update the data. In this case, we have the data in our cloud system. And in this case, there is an integration with the backend system where the subset of information that is used for our application, in this case, to manage the material master data, to find the duplicates, to manage the new material creation and so on, obviously is replicated in our system.
So stay with me, Julia, because there's another question that came in that really follows on to this one. A lot of times in working with data solutions, yes, there is a claim that there's an AI involved or some automation, but in reality, when the data comes back to the end users for the first time, there's still a lot of heavy manipulation that needs to occur. And sometimes this is a good 2 to 3 weeks, requiring up to 10 people to validate the data that your system supposedly already did. So the question here is two-part question. When that data is being first cleansed, how much level of effort is being required from the end users? And then as that data is being refreshed, is there still effort being required going on?
This is a very good question, because one of the main challenges we faced in order to improve our processes was to reduce as much as possible the effort from the customer side. So what we have done and developed is a platform, cloud platform, that makes us possible from one side to leverage the knowledge from the previous experiences. So we have a knowledge base that already includes all the knowledge we collected analyzing the data of more than 150 companies all around the world in order to have a strong starting point. And we already understand a lot of the data that we receive thanks to this experience. On top of that, there is a part of the understanding that is done automatically by the AI, because understanding and processing the data, automatically the system learn. But there is a part that is still requiring human intervention, but we make in a way that our data analyst will make the most part of the work, and we ask to the domain expert of the customer only few questions during what we call feedback loops. Usually, when we talk about categorization, there are 4 sessions of a couple of hours of online work, plus half a day of offline work in the cloud platform done by the domain expert. And this is enough to achieve 95% of accuracy. And the 95% of accuracy is confirmed by the domain expert that will evaluate a statistical sample. And this is done during the initial AI training to create the initial digital twin. Then the refresh is automated, and data analysts from our side and from our partners will take care to manage the novelties. Then, if the customer wants to be involved once per year in a feedback loop to have a check on those novelties, this is absolutely possible and can be done, but is not mandatory, because usually the novelties are few if you don't completely change your kind of production.
There's a question that came through, and I'm not sure which person this is directed at, but the question is E-class also available?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a you question. Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I shown UNSPSC, so probably some German colleagues in the session.
Okay.
E-class is very, very used in German areas, but I can also say that we are not focused on a standard. Obviously, if you don't have a strong taxonomy, a standard is a good option, but if you have a custom taxonomy, you can use also a custom one, and E-class is a good standard as well, so we are agnostic.
Fantastic. Lucas, for you, so there's a lot of companies out there that have these niche supplier optimizations, or I'm a supplier company and I use predictive analytics for sourcing. And a lot of times these questions come up that, well, that's great that these sourcing applications have that, but because we're doing something complex, or the tool's got all this complexity with technology, it's still requiring a lot of lead time from the time we agree to go with an Archlet to the time that it's really up and running and adding value. So the question for you is, what is that cycle time to get Archlet up and running? How quickly can I get value to my end users? And is there just a lot of training involved?
Good question. And I think historically that's the case, yes. So these tools who solve complexity in sourcing were rather complex. You needed training, sometimes even consultancies to actually handle that complexity. And there are even tools out there you need to code to create scenarios. What we try to achieve with Archlet is a bit different. We might not be as powerful as these tools from the past, but we focus on simplicity. So what I've shown you there was no kind of trick, right? I uploaded the data, and the graphs are, for example, completely automatically created. So we don't need an expert user to create these graphs, but the goal is that we guide them through the process. Same with the scenarios. You can learn how to do it manually, but now with our Copilot, which is GDPR aligned, you can actually just write what you need. So again, complexity drops massively in using it. Regarding setup, how long it takes us until we're up and running, this really depends if we are used as a standalone, which means that you take the data as a download, for example, from your ERP or from your Creactives instance, and start an event as a standalone. So this is up and running whenever you need us to be up and running. As soon we need to be integrated, obviously there might be some time needed for an integration. For example, we work often with SAP Ariba clients. So there we have to kind of set up our API, which might take 2 or 3 weeks. But besides that, we always say, if you have done one event to Archlet, you can do it yourself. You're sufficient. And this is definitely amazing, because this was not the case in the past.
Yeah, I think so. What I hear a lot going on, the conversations, is talent shortage. I believe there was a comment, on NPR that said, within the next 5 years, we're in 2023, within the next 5 years, those last little remaining, baby boomers, they're out of the market. And yeah, to a certain extent, okay, great. But the challenge is those were the guys that stayed with companies for 20, 30 years, had deep expert knowledge in these complex MRO categories. And with them leaving, it's not just creating a talent shortage, it's creating a skill set and a knowledge shortage. And so what I think, the value that I saw today from you, Archlet, is that your tool, because of this, being able to just your co-pilot, you don't have to understand the complexity of the tool to create a specific query. I don't have to be a data scientist to query your data. You showed today that I can just be a normal end user. I can use my own language. I can type into the tool and I can get those results back. And so that's where I'm, connecting the dots there.
Exactly.
A question that came up that's really gonna talk to both of you is that when we look at the complex bidding of MRO and complexity, and we recognize that we're talking about unstructured data, we want to go ahead and get to that data as quickly as possible. But how much enrichment is being done in that data so that someone like an Archlet application can really leverage it to fully take advantage of item level specifications or more technical details around the purchasing of that information to really get the best value possible out of an Archlet solution?
Should I take that quickly, and then you maybe enrich it, Julia? I mean, that's a very, very good question. And what we have implemented in our tool is called alternative items or off-spec bids, meaning that, yes, as your, let's say, desire or what you're looking for are on-spec bids, which you can define very clearly thanks to Creactives or other players. And but this is probably not the reality, because suppliers might not have that specific specification, right? As mentioned, as one of the challenges in the very beginning. So what our system would do is we would recognize if a system is off spec. Suppliers can also actively tell the buyer that these are off spec items. So when you then analyze these items on these SKUs, you can always differentiate between on spec and off spec. And we would, for example, also give you a warning if you have items without on spec bids, which is very harmful for you, because maybe that means you need to qualify a new supplier or you need to find a new source, which is usually a lot of stress and pain for a category manager. And maybe Julia, you have something to add.
Yeah, I said before that we will try to squeeze the lemon, so use all the sources that are available, but still there are obviously some parts that maybe has not enough information. We have a process in this case in the material master data governance area to collect the information from the guys that are present in the plant where the item is in stock. So if an item is relevant, because you don't have to do this kind of enrichment for whatever item, but if an item has a high consumption and you don't want to be a slave of the current supplier and you want to have the possibility to have enough information to change, you have probably enough information in your stock, because some parts are in your stock and a person that is present in that plant can access to the stock, and the AI can guide him in asking which is the relevant information that he has to put in place in order to have the right spec, because each category has a different set of technical characteristics in our AI, so, and can be configured. So you can change this set of technical specification. If you want to add an attribute that is, I don't know, the color, because in a particular kind of production, the different level of chemical are recognizable in engines by the color. I don't know, but the motor, an AC motor has not the color in the normal attributes. You had it, perfect. When the user will go to the stock to look at the motor in order to enrich the information, the color will be among the technical characteristics that he has to enrich together with the class and the voltage and whatever. This information collected at the source is something that is for sure powerful, but must not be done for everything, only for the things that make sense. This is the reason why our material master data governance has a KPI of value in order to drive the users to enrich what makes sense.
So there's a follow-up question to this that was a common theme across a couple of folks is if I can leverage the data that I've collected in Archlet and use that as a system to feed back into Creactive.
Why not? Because the descriptions that are present in the price list can be a wonderful additional data source to enrich, obviously, the material master data. Yes.
Right.
And I think I stopped in the demo. I didn't do the full one because obviously you could define your final decision and then download that data and feed it back to the catalog systems or to Creactive.
Fantastic. That does answer some similar common themes that we've been seeing in some of the questions. So this is a lengthy question, and I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it word for word. As Melissa quoted, data is the underlying foundation towards an efficient sourcing process. Garbage in, garbage out, as we say. An MRO is an example, a perfect example, excellent example of this. Data can also be an opportunity for improvement and value creation. One of the main challenges in MRO is related to demand forecasting and inventory management. And predictive maintenance supported by an AI will help with this process. Maybe a bit of foresight, but what role does your solution, whether in isolation or integrated with others, what role does your solution play in enhancing that MRO end-to-end process from a demand to inventory to deliver? As an example, by using data that has been generated from the sourcing process, like reoccurrence of needs, lead times from the supplier, are there examples or use cases that you guys have seen? I think, Lucas, this is being more focused to you, but are there use cases you've seen where your data is being able to leverage in such a way? Lucas, you can go first.
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yes, it is. That's why I was like, oh, that was a good question.
So I think when it's about demand forecast and inventory management, I rarely saw that we help to improve that. Sometimes what we see is that you start a sourcing event with different volumes, different assumptions, where you say, this is best case, this is good case, this is worst case. And then while you run the RFP, you adjust these kind of estimates and therefore kind of, again, adjust your demand planning. But I've never really seen that it works super automatically and that our data is then fed into the inventory data. So I'm curious if this might be a future area where we can play and focus more on. So far, I came not across of one of these examples, but maybe you did, Julia.
I have a use case that is, I would say, in overlap, even if not fully with this request. The topic is when you find duplicates in the material master data, it means that you have duplicates in your stock. So there is a huge probability that the same article is present even in the same plant or in plants that are contiguous from the perspective of the regional management of your stocks. So the knowledge about the real presence of these duplicates can be a huge information in order to reduce the stocks, because you can have impact on the safety stock knowing that the part is the same. I'm not saying that I am implementing a demand planning. You can have another tool for that, or you can implement an inventory optimization that automatically recalculates the stocks. But there is a rule that is the square root rule in logistics that says that if I have 3 items that are the same in my stock, I can reduce the safety stock by square root of 3. And I can say that this kind of approach can be used in order to find hotspot of improvement in the management of the safety stocks, thanks to the knowledge that the same part is stocked in the same place or contiguous places.
We're starting to wrap up, but there's one more question that slid right in there, and I think it should be fairly quick, but it's to both of you. Both of you are currently residing outside of the US. And so the question came in is, what is your presence inside North America?
Yeah, we are residing outside the US, but the idea is that for us, we expand our services through partners. So we have several partners that are certified to implement our products outside Europe and in the US, in Latin America, in Asia Pacific. So the idea is that the fact that our headquarters is in Italy is not a limitation. And from the other side, we already have a customer with headquarters in US. We are running now a huge project in Mexico, for example, as well. So this is something that is not a limit.
So they can go through your partners, or they can come and work with you directly.
Absolutely.
And Lucas, same question for you.
A similar answer. So we are a Swiss-based company, but we're very international from the beginning. We have several clients who are US only. For example, Gordon Food Service, a large food service provider, they only have operations in the US and Canada, and we can, of course, support them through our ecosystem. So we offer global support, and even though we are in Switzerland, time zones don't really matter for our support team, which is across the world. Also, we have partners. We mainly work with consultancies. And also, if there is a gap in a certain area, we can definitely always find a suitable setup.
Fantastic. As we look to wrap up today, I want to thank you guys. I think we just illustrated that we are truly global. We've had a lot of response from folks that have been sitting on this discussion with us internationally. Some of them super late at night drinking coffee to stay awake, and some of them super early in the morning drinking coffee to stay awake. As we look to depart, Julia, Lucas, do you have one or two sentences of what advice would you give to someone who's starting the process of looking at an MRO sourcing event?
I think that they don't have to give up, because even if at this in the beginning the complexity seems to be overwhelming, there are plenty of solutions that can help them to find the light at the end of the tunnel in an easy way.
Yeah, and just go step by step, break it down, maybe create buckets, and then go step by step, and you will actually overcome the complexity as well. So definitely don't give up and go step by step might be my advice.
How can people get a hold of you guys? Because I know that an hour went by really fast. I know some of these questions had, some potential follow-ons. Where can they get access to you guys and maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of these conversations?
The people can connect with us through LinkedIn or through our website, and we also will participate to several events. So if you are in Barcelona next week or in Amsterdam to the DPW in October, we are there. So we are more than happy to connect with the people that wants to have more information.
All right. So reach out LinkedIn, go to your website. Someone will definitely get back to them. Okay. And
Absolutely.
Lucas?
Yeah, same LinkedIn websites. We're also in Amsterdam at DPW, Spend Connect in Vienna. So I think we see you.
Are you guys coming to the US? I mean, we had some folks on North America asking about your presence in North America. You guys coming to the US next year or this year?
I will be in the US for 2 weeks in December.
Oh,
yeah.
I think that some of my colleagues that follow the US market will have some present in US as well, and can be arranged for sure something specific if it's requested.
I am happy to say that we were able to address all the questions that popped up today. Thank you again so much for your time and the effort that you put in to put the presentations and the visual representation of the topics today.
Thank you very much, Melissa. To you, Melissa.
Right, bye.
Thank you to everyone joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you to everybody. Bye.